a crash course on taxes. Today, we'll discuss taxes. We'll talk about the benefits of taxes, why we have them, and why you should accept the rise that will move you into the next tax bracket. Rebellions as well, and the British Empire's poor judgment towards taxing colonies. Even while your struggles with taxes and the tax law may seem especially painful to you right now, people have long paid taxes and complained about them, a lot longer than any of us have existed. The parents or our forefathers. The ancient Mesopotamians paid taxes with animals and labor. There are inscriptions and tomb scenes from the ancient Egyptians that reveal proof of taxes, tax collectors, and even tax shelters. Additionally, taxes and tax collectors are frequently mentioned in the Bible. In the Bible, taxes are mentioned as a necessary evil, such as in the phrase, "Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's." Tax collectors are also mentioned as sinners alongside prostitutes. A little later, in 1927, Oliver Wendell Holmes, a U.S. Supreme Court justice, once said, "Taxes are what we pay for civilized society. Maybe it's time we forgive tax collectors too." Accordingly, taxes have existed for almost as long as there have been records of organized society. But why? What are the purposes of taxes? Taxes are the simplest way to fund government services. At least according to the government in power. Taxes are utilized to promote society's well-being. They enable us to pay for services that the market might not cover on its own. Things like education, national defense, and public safety. The environment can be protected by taxes. They can assist a nation in putting fiscal and monetary policies intended to promote economic growth into action. Taxes can be used to redistribute wealth within a society, from those with more to those with less. There are a few methods for this to happen, some of which are more direct than others. One example is an income tax system where top earners pay greater rates of tax than low earners. We'll return to that later. Government subsidies and vouchers, such as those for housing and food stamps, also redistribute wealth. Same goes for luxury taxes, which are essentially an extra charge for expensive things like jet planes, pricey furs, and that incredibly irksome diamond ring space on the Monopoly board. Taxes can also be used by governments to attempt to alter citizens' behavior. Sin taxes on harmful products like alcohol and cigarettes are intended to lower consumption of these goods. The goal of gasoline taxes is to get people to drive less. France implemented soda taxes in an effort to reduce the consumption of sugary beverages. Danish lawmakers enacted a fat tax on meals with a disproportionately high saturated fat content before repealing it. Several governments, notably those in British Columbia, Ireland, and Chile, have enacted carbon taxes, which essentially impose fees on corporations and occasionally even people based on the quantity of greenhouse gases they use or produce. Different countries have different versions of these carbon taxes. For instance, British Columbians are subject to a carbon tax that increases their petrol prices by 6.67 cents per liter. That's around $0.25 per gallon for those of us in the US, Myanmar, and Liberia who don't use the metric system. In Chile, owners of power plants are charged $5 for each metric ton of carbon dioxide that is released into the atmosphere. When discussing taxes, economists will occasionally distinguish between direct and indirect taxes. Direct taxes are those that are paid to the government entity that collected them directly by an individual or a corporation. These include income taxes and property taxes, where there is no middleman, so no need to transfer the tax burden to another party. Although sales taxes and value-added taxes are not exactly the same, they are both excellent instances of indirect taxes. They are genuinely paid for by consumers but are collected by a retailer, seller, or producer of the items. They are taxes that every consumer must pay, regardless of their income. The price of a pair of socks at a nearby mall will be precisely the same as the price paid by a millionaire at the same retailer. According to some economists, indirect taxes causes market price distortion and the Voldemort of economic outcomes, inefficiency, which is one of the things economists fear the most. Taxes are also described by economists as progressive, regressive, and proportionate. Regressive taxes will be discussed first. Because everyone pays the same amount, regressive taxes can appear to be fair because they are imposed uniformly. However, regressive taxes harm low-income earners more than high-income ones. Sales taxes are thought to be regressive, particularly on necessities. Due to this, several regions exempt purchases of food and prescription medications from paying sales taxes. Some economists contend that regressive taxes also apply to other fees, such as those for driver's licenses, toll highways, and hunting licenses. Why? Imagine that two drivers visit the Department of Motor Vehicles to obtain fresh licenses. One earns $200,000 annually, while the other just makes $20,000. For their driver's license, each will pay the same price. The cost of the license is substantially greater for drivers with lesser incomes. And for this reason, those with lower incomes suffer disproportionately from regressive taxation. Progressive taxes are on the other extreme of the taxing range. Progressive taxes are essentially the opposite of regressive taxes, in that they move the cost of taxation from those with lower incomes to those with higher incomes. The income tax we have in the United States is progressive, which means that when people earn more money, they have to pay more in taxes. It's important to understand how the progressive income tax in the US operates before you start thinking about whether earning an extra $100 this year would push you into a higher tax bracket. The IRS utilizes marginal income tax brackets, which are based on the total amount of taxable income you made during a given year, to determine how much tax you owe. These marginal tax rates are the highest income tax rates that you could pay. There are now 7 different tax brackets. However, regardless of the tax band you are in, you won't have to pay that rate on all of your income. Instead, the portions of your taxable income that match to each tax rate are divided up, and you pay the corresponding rate on each of those portions. Consider the scenario where your yearly income as a single filer was $37,450. You would then be subject to a tax rate of 15% as a result. However, you would continue to pay the lower 10% rate on your first $9,225 in earnings. Therefore, if you added the extra $100 and earned $37,550, your tax rate would go to 25%. However, you would only pay 25% on the additional $100. You would have a lower effective tax rate. Another thing to bear in mind with regards to US income taxes is the abundance of tax credits, exemptions, and deductions that lower the amount of money owed. Therefore, despite what the 25% tax bracket might have you believe, your tax bill will never be as painful. There are several additional nations with progressive income tax regimes throughout the world. However, it turns out that it can be challenging to assess how progressive a nation's overall tax system is, particularly when compared to another nation. It's not as simple as judging which nations have more progressive tax policies by looking at those with the highest marginal tax rates, since there are so many more taxes and tax benefits to consider. Some economists contend that in the United States, the progressive nature of our income tax structure balances out the regressive nature of many other taxes we pay, if the terms progressiveness and regressiveness even exist. We've now discussed both progressive and regressive taxes. Proportional taxes are the third category of taxes. Regardless of income level, proportional taxes demand the same percentage of income from all taxpayers. An example of proportional tax is the flat tax. Flat taxes are often praised by politicians, in part because they are less complex than the country's current, immensely complex tax law. Additionally, they feel fair in a way. Consider a 10% flat tax. The government receives $20,000 from the women making $200,000, but only $2,000 from the man making $20,000. They both experience a 10% pinch. The flat tax is opposed by economists who claim that emotions have no place in the tax code. They contend a flat tax is neither as easy nor as equitable as it first appears. They claim that eliminating all the tax breaks, exemptions, and credits we discussed earlier might impact a lot of how people make financial decisions, including whether to buy a home, give to charities, or save for retirement in tax-sheltered accounts. The current tax code encourages all of those behaviors. As we previously discussed, some economists contend that United States progressive income tax balances out some of our other more regressive taxes. They contend that a flat tax would make our overall tax system regressive by shifting the bulk of the tax burden from the wealthiest to the lower and middle classes. This whole thing is difficult, even if it seems easy. Take the time to thoroughly research what changing the tax system would imply for the economy before you buy into anyone's proposal. Additionally, make sure you are at ease with all of the ramifications. Speaking of tax policy's effects, they can have quite negative effects. Moreover, intriguing. Rebellion has happened in the past when a government made a bad tax decision. Let's head over to the thought bubble. You've probably heard of the American Revolution as one tax uprising. Britain faced a significant debt when the 7 Years' War concluded in 1763. It looked to the colonists in America for a source of income because it needed one. The British Parliament began levies on the sales of molasses in 1764. They passed the Stamp Act in 1765, which increased the cost of paper and legal documents. British officials' tax policy and other initiatives were driving colonists ever more crazy. Anyway, you are aware of the process. Boston Tea Party. No taxation without representation. A big war. The French joined the conflict. Finally, we have a free America, and representation in addition, except in Washington, D.C. The Salt March, a more recent tax uprising in India, was incredibly fascinating. The British were in command of India in 1930, and their rules at the time made it illegal for Indians to harvest or trade salt. Instead, they were forced to purchase it from a British monopoly that imposed a sales tax of 8.2%. Mohandas Gandhi made the decision to disobey the Salt Act by traveling 240 miles to the Arabian seashore in order to collect salt that was exempt from tax. More and more Indians joined him throughout his trip in the nonviolent civil disobedience. He arrived at the beach, took a salt cube, and breached the law. Making and selling non-British salt, thousands of people in a nonviolent rebellion followed his example. The Salt March received extensive coverage in newsreels and newspapers, drawing attention to the generally peaceful Indian independence movement on a global scale. All of that is due to taxes. Thank you, Thought Bubble. Of course, there are alternatives to fighting or organizing a large-scale civil disobedience movement if you don't want to pay taxes. We know that people have been evading taxes for a long time based on historical records. Some people literally pack up their homes and leave them. Others have found careers that exempt them from paying taxes. According to historians, throughout the Middle Ages, several European males became monks in order to escape paying taxes. The fact that some Chinese men joined Buddhist monasteries to avoid paying taxes is supported by evidence. There is a room for dispute over the size of government, as well as its proper and improper functions. You, as a taxpayer and as a user of government services, should be interested in all of those discussions. However, as we have repeatedly stated, there are some things that the market simply cannot offer. Some safeguards won't be guaranteed. Nobody enjoys having to pay taxes, but we appreciate what they do for us. We appreciate you watching. Remember that the next tax bracket is not particularly terrifying. Again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time!